Hello guys, welcome to our bouncing ball tutorial. I'm going to quickly show you how to manage to rig this ball and prepare it for animation. It's complex, but it's not difficult. It just takes some time. Alright, so I have created a new scene, all clean. And those are my two objects. So I've created the main body, which is the bouncing ball, and I renamed it accordingly, bouncing ball. If you want to rename yours, just click there, type the name, and confirm by pressing enter, or just click outside the box. And for this one, those are two objects merged as one, and I have named it antenna. That's my appendage. Okay, so as you can see, they have a value to them. So let's clear that value. So if you select both objects, come to modify, freeze transformations. If you go to freeze transformations options, you can see what you can choose to freeze. All the transformations. What freeze transformations will do is it will reset everything to 0, or in the case of the scale, will set to 1. So there you go. So there will be no added values to this material. Okay. Here, let's go back to the regular view. Let's start with the main body. So for this object, what I need is that it will be able to be squashed and stretched, so you can bounce the ball, or you can resize the ball, you can compress it, you can stretch it, however you like to do it. So in that case, imagine you've got virtual fingers pressing on that ball on top and on the bottom, like you would be holding in your hand and you're pressing against your finger and your thumb. So basically you will need something to simulate those your finger and your thumb pressing on the top and on the bottom of the ball to squash it or stretch it. Let me show you. So let's change this to rigging. If I come to skeleton, I will be able to create a joint. So I will put a joint right here on top and another one right here on the bottom. So those are the supposed finger and thumb that you're going to use to squash it, and at the same time to stretch it. Let's say that your finger and your thumb is glued to the ball, and as you pull up, you pull out, you can stretch it. If you press in, you can squash it. By the way, those joints, they have to be precisely at this point. When working with joints, you need precision. A joint out of place will cause deformation that you don't want for your object. Okay, so let's try something different so we can guarantee that those joints will be in the right place. So I know that I want a joint exactly at that point, right? So in that case, with that point selected, we can come to deform and create a cluster. So what a cluster does, it will create this C cluster thingy right here. Let's do it again. Go to vertex, select the vertex you want, click and deform, cluster. I need a cluster precisely at the middle of this object. So with the whole object selected, or the edge around the object selected, I will come and create another cluster which will be right at the middle. If you open your outliner, if you don't know how to see your outliner, you've got this icon here. If you cannot see this icon, you can come to Windows, Outliner, and you select those three clusters we're going to isolate the selection once and isolate it again until I see only the clusters. With those 3 clusters selected, I will go to display, transform display, selection handles. Those selection handles will make it easy for you to snap your joints into the clusters. Right, let's go back, create joint. So if you click on it and hold V on your keyboard, V for Victor, hold V and left click on your cluster, and again and again. Right, you basically created the whole joint, the whole skeleton for this object. But I don't want this way, so I'm gonna undo twice, and I will leave that one over there. So I will create a new joint, hold V and click there. Or the other way you can do, with a joint created, you can just Control D to duplicate it, hold move, make sure that the square in the middle is selected, hold V and middle mouse click and drag to the cluster. So now you snap it to the last cluster. Once you've got your joints in the right place, you can come and delete the clusters. And let's name those joints. So this one is the main joint right in the middle. I'm going to call it control, let's say. So joints will always start with JNT for joint space. I will put control. Sorry, I will start with joint ball control. Right. This one on top. So I'll start with joint upper ball, and the last one joint lower ball. When working with, when doing anything in Maya, it's always good that you name everything, but especially joints, especially skeletons, when you're rigging, everything has to have a name, because later on something more complex you're gonna have to select them by name, because there will be so many on the screen, it will be really confusing. Okay, with those done, I'm gonna leave them for now and we will come back to it later. So I'll bring all what is hidden back. There you go, and we're going to rig the antenna. Let's isolate its selection. Right, for the antenna I want a soft bend instead of a straight, hard, ugly bend. So for the soft bend, it means I need extra joints, because each joint will bend a little bit and them all together will give you the impression of a very soft movement. So with that in mind, I have created the antenna with this precise topology. In that case, I'm going to create, let's do a different selection. In that case, I'm going to create 1, 2, 3, 4, and inside here you've got the last of the vertices, 5 joints for this object. Let's press 4 in the keyboard for display only the wireframe, then you can see through the object. Okay, so let's start with the clusters again. I will select this loop on the bottom, and if you remember, we're going to create a cluster here. This loop, press G on your keyboard to repeat the last action, cluster, this loop, and this loop. Go back into object mode, select those clusters, isolate selection so you can hide everything else, and let's start by creating joints for those clusters. Come to skeleton, create joint, hold V and click. Didn't work. Press W, hold V, middle mouse click, it doesn't work. Remember why? Because there will be no there's no selection in those clusters. Select those clusters again, come to display, transform display, selection handles. There you go. Now you can select the object, hold V, and middle mouse click, it will snap to the cluster. So I'll duplicate that and snap, duplicate, snap, duplicate, snap, and last one, duplicate and snap. Let's get rid of those clusters and start renaming those joints. Joint 1 will be joint base, no, antenna base, joint antenna A, let's name this joint antenna B, joint antenna C, and the final one, joint antenna D. Okay, everything is named. Let's create the controls now. Bring everything back, press 5 on your keyboard to see everything, or perhaps 6, 5, something selected. Okay, X-ray is on. Let's deselect X-ray. But there's another type of X-ray that is very useful in this case. You can click on X-ray joints. So now you can see all the joints, but not through the object. Okay, let's create the controls that we're going to use to animate this object. We're going to create simple controls. We don't need to create anything too complex. So that's the main base control. Selecting this one will select everything, the whole object. So I will create this circle. I'm going to rename it as control main. On the attribute editor, I'm going to control main. I'm going to delete history. If you don't remember, it's Shift Alt D to delete history. With that selected, come to drawing overrides within display. If you click in drawing overrides, enable overrides, and here we're going to choose a color. Normally, rig controls, they have very bright colors. So we've got this control. We're going to create another one, and I'm going to move up, hold V, and move up will snap to that joint over there. So I'm going to resize to make it bigger. This is your ball control. That with this control you're going to animate the ball and squash and stretch and move and rotate the ball however you like. But this one only affects the ball, not the antenna. This one will select everything, so you can move everything around and do as you please. Right, with this done, let's delete the history, if you remember, and I'm going to duplicate that again, and I'm going to move and snap to the base of the antenna. It can be somewhere else as well. Let's do it here, for example. Let's resize that, let's make it smaller, and let's change its color. So the base one is a bright green. How about we do a red for the body to make it different from the one I have, and this one we're going to give it a bright yellow. There you go. Okay, so they are easy to spot. You know what color corresponds to what. Easy to animate later. Right, this one, there's a trick to this one, because this control is positioned here, but I want to use this to bend the antenna. I will need the center of this control to be moved down. If you press D on your keyboard, you can change the pivot of this object. So hold D, you will see the gizmo will change to this. Hold V to snap and move it down until it snap to the lower one. Not this one, the lower. The one on top correspond to the main body, the ball, and this one correspond to the antenna. So now the pivot of your object is down there, not here anymore. See, if you press E, you can rotate the object and you will rotate on that angle. It might make things a bit weird, but you will see later how it works. Let's undo this. Let's rename that as well, we forgot. So that's control antenna, and this will be control ball. Okay, now you've got this in front of you. We're going to start connecting those dots, connecting those joints. Before you do that, this is the last chance to start deleting history. Make sure you delete, you select everything, delete history here, delete the history, and again and again. So let's start. Let's start with the antenna. So I'm going to select the antenna joint plus the control. This is the complicated one, actually. So let's start with the main body. I'm going to select the joints in the main body plus the control, and I'm going to hide everything else. So for this one, I'm going to start to parent everything. If you don't know what parent is, it's simple. A parent and child relationship means that when you add a value to the parent, or you change the parent in some ways, that change will be transmitted towards the child, but not the other way around. Right, in that case, whenever I move or I cause any transformation in this joint, I want the same transformation to be applied on those joints in the extremity. In that case, I'm going to select the child first. Let's press Q on the keyboard to hide the control. Select the child first, select the parent after, and press P on your keyboard. And again, the child, the parent, and P. And in that case, I'm going to connect this joint with this control. So everything I do in this control will affect this joint, which will affect the joints that are connected to that. Before I do that, as you can see, there is a value to this control, and we want to remove everything and make it clean and ready to be animated. Any extra value will add later to your animation, and it might cause you trouble. Let's get rid of those values. So if you remember, select the joint. Let's freeze the transformation. Sorry, select the control and come to modify, freeze transformation, and now everything is clean. Once again, select the child, select the parent, and press P. So now when I rotate, the joint rotates. When I squash, they will be squashed and stretched, as well as moved. So you don't need to select joints anymore, you just have to select the control, because later we're going to hide those joints. Let's bring everything back by clicking isolate selection again, and let's do the antenna. Right, the main body was the easy one, very easy. This one on the antenna is a little bit more complicated, and I'll show you why. Let me just select those joints first, the control, and hide everything else. Okay, so because I want a soft bend, it means that every time I move this control, I want that value to be added equally to each one of those joints. Let's start by clearing those values here. This modify, freeze transformation, everything is a value of 0. Oh, I've done something wrong here. Before I parent anything to those joints, to these controls, I need to parent those controls to the main control. So I'm going to unparent this. To unparent, you select the child, press Shift P, and I have unparented it. So now if I move, nothing will happen. See? Right, this one has to be connected to this one. So select the child first, select the parent, and press P, and then the middle one will be connected to the lower one, the base one. Select the middle one, select the base, press P. Why? Right, because every time I select this one, I want it to select everything else, including the mesh. So in this case, I could select the mesh as well, select the base, and press P. So once I click here, everything will be selected and I can move them around. Those joints will be parented to those controls, so later when you select everything and you move, so will the joints. Okay, let's go back. Remember, press the child first, select the child first, select the parent, press P, and now it's back connected to that control. And let me show you again. If you move the main control, everything will move, and if I move only this one will be affected. Right, going back to the exercise, let's select the antenna joints and the antenna control and hide everything else. Okay, this one gets a little bit more complicated. For this reason, we're going to select everything again, and then we're going to Windows, Rendering Editors, Hypershade. In the Hypershade, make sure that this panel is empty, and if you want to clear this panel, if there's anything there, you can click this button here and it will clear the graph. Right, with those joints and controls selected, as you can see there, we're going to click this button here, and now we're going to click this button here with the plus sign, and it will bring everything. Let's start by organizing this. So I'll click and move here and just move them side by side like this. You will see that it's actually quite simple. And I'll get this tiny little one here and move to the side. I don't need that. Let's move it away and let's bring it down. So what are those? What are those? Right, this is what make those objects work. So whatever you do in those objects, those are the controls for it. In that case, so every time I move the antenna control, I want that value to be equally distributed to each one of the joints, as you can see here. So let's go back here. In that case, let's open rotate. So every time I rotate the control, it will also rotate each one of those. So which what I will do, it will basically connect each one of them. If I press this 3 times, you open a bigger menu here, a bigger control panel. When I connect anything, you see those dots here? When I connect anything to this dot, it means that some value will be added to this value. So what I want to do is to add the antenna rotate values to the joint rotate values. If I click and drag and connect to this little sphere, little ball, little dot, however you like to call it, and release, there'll be a little link connecting that. Right. So a rotate value of 1 will add a rotate value of 1 to this one automatically. And you can just come and connect it again to rotate. Again to rotate. Again. And again. Let's see how it looks like. Now, let's minimize the hypershade. I will select my control, press rotate. As you can see, when I select the control, everything turns into this purplish color, which means there is a constraint, there is a connection in between them. So whatever I do on this one will affect those colored in purple. So with the rotated selection, let's rotate this a little bit. Ooh, nothing happened. Why? Because they're not connected. Let's connect them. So remember parent and child thing. So this will be the child of that. Press B. This will be the child of that. And so on. And so on. Let's rotate it again. And voila. Now as you can see, it's very nice and smooth, right? Let's undo that. So you close the hypershade, you've got this finished. Let's bring everything back and let's start skinning the object. Oh no, before we do that, now when I squash this one, I want the antenna to follow, otherwise we're going to have a floating antenna when you squash your object, or you might cover the whole antenna with the body of the object, which will look really bad and weird. So what we're going to do here now is to make sure that the antenna will follow that joint right there without actually taking any of its property. So it will have to be an unrelated connection here. To create an unrelated connection, we're going to come here and create a locator. So going to create, press locator. You should see it somewhere. Let's move out of the way. Let's put the locator there. Locator, they normally quite big. You need them to be more discrete. You can just come to local scale, and I like to work with 0.2. It's nice and small. Right, with the move selected, with the little yellow square in the middle, I will zoom in because I want this locator to be precisely at the last joint of the antenna. So let me select the antenna, those joints, sorry, the locator, those joints, and I'll hide everything else so it makes it easier to see. So here I've got the locator, and I've got the that is the last joint on the bouncing ball, and this is the first joint in the antenna. Okay, so with when we're creating a constraint, you need to select the other way around. Remember, when you select first the child and then the parent, when you're doing parenting, this will be a little bit different. Now you need to select the parent first and then the child, and now we're going to create a constraint. We click on constraint and we're doing a parent constraint. So now every time I select this locator, it will also affect whatever is connected to it. Right, and now once you've got this constraint, we're going to select the locator, select the last joint, and press P on your keyboard to parent those two. Let's bring everything back. Now every time I squash this, it will also bring the antenna down without actually adding any value. Now you ask me, oh, if you're parenting, why did you do a different parenting? Why did you create a constraint? Because if I directly parent the antenna to the body, any value that I add to the body will leak through the antenna and will be added to the antenna. In this case, I had to create an unrelated link between them, and the locator is the unrelated link. So for the locator to actually make the antenna move without adding any value, that's why they are different parenting. There are the regular parenting with the P on the keyboard, and there is the parent constraint. The parent constraint will not allow any other value to be added to the object. Let's select that locator again. It should be here somewhere. Where is the locator? Let's select it. There you go. With this locator selected, we're going to hide it. So make sure you can select only the locator. Come to attribute editor, and you should see display. Not this display. Object display. Oh my goodness, it was right here. Object display. Clicking the visibility, you hide the locator. You won't see that anymore, and you cannot select it anymore unless you click in the locator. There you go. This is the locator. By clicking here, you can select it, although you cannot see it. And if you want to see it again, just click in visibility. But you won't need it. The locator is done. You don't need it anymore. So now, almost done. You've got your object control, and this will affect that. Good. Let's skin it now. That's the last step. Okay. So to skin, you need to select every single joint in this chain. Is there a value to this? Hold on. Nope. It looks a bit stretchy to me, doesn't it? Anyways, let's select again. If you select the middle one, you select everything, but that will not do, because you still need those two to be selected. Otherwise, it will not skin correct it. So it's good if you start by the child first, and then you go through the parents. With those three joints selected, you select your mesh, and then you come to skin, bind skin, and settings, options. Everything will be the same. This value should be on 2. You probably see as a 5. It just changed to 2. And bind skin. And we'll do the same now for the antenna. Select the first and the subsequent ones. Select your mesh. Come to skin, bind skin. And now that's how the magic happens. There you go. Now you're squashing and stretching the object. We are rotating and moving the object. And for this one, we're going to rotate, and it will look nice and smooth. Let's bring the object smoothness back. Press 3 on your keyboard. Leave it as it is. If I select the main control, I can... Ooh, something wrong here. Right. In that case, what's wrong here? Because I have this object parented to the main control, as well as the controls parent to this. So every time I add a value to this, I will double the value on the mesh, because the mesh is receiving the value from the main control, the base control, plus the value from each one of those controls. And that is why it will move like that. So let's reset the value here, and let's undo this. So to undo that, I'm going to have to remove this skin effect. I'm going to delete history. If you remember, Shift Alt D, so the object is not skinned anymore. With this selected, with the object selected, we're going to press Shift P to unparent, and now you see this mesh is not related to this anymore. And now when I select the base control, the main control, the mesh will not be selected as well. And let's skin it again. Select the joints, mesh, skin, bind skin, and again the joint, mesh, skin, bind skin. Let's try again. Select main control, and now it's moving as it's supposed to be, as well as rotating, squashing and stretching, and bending. For this control, I only need it I only need this control to apply rotation to this part of the object. So in that case, I will select the translate. I don't need translate. Right click, come lock and hide selected. And the same with scale invisibility, lock and hide. And now, as well as to rotate Y, I will never need to rotate in Y, so I don't need to control that, just make it complicated. Even if you want to rotate in Y, you cannot now because it's locked. As well as move, you cannot move, or scale, only rotate in those two axes. For this control, I need everything. I need to move, I need to scale, and I need to rotate. So this one, so we're not going to change anything. After everything is rigged, it's good that you lock your mesh so you don't click on it anymore, because any changes you make here will drastically affect your rig, so you don't want to do that. So go back to object mode, select those two objects. We're going to create a layer. So with those two objects selected, you create here, you click this button to create a new layer and assign the selected objects. We're going to rename that as bouncing ball topo. Layers do not allow space, so let's put an underscore here and here. You can choose a color if you like. Yeah, let's do a red, shall we? And save. And if you press once, you will see wireframe mode, and if you press another time, it will lock the object. It cannot be selected anymore. But if you select the controls, you can still affect the object just the same. Okay, and the last thing to do is to hide those joints. All you have to do is to come here, click show, click joints, and voila, you've done, and you're ready to texture the object and start animating. Good luck.